in order for the samurai to train with live swords, they first had to practice the use of the bokuto, which is the wooden sword that you see TO KENDO holding here. And throughout their practice, they performed these ritualized forms of fighting, almost like choreographed routine. And this is a way for the people to develop their skills with the basic cutting techniques and also to learn how to counter attacks from the enemy. So as you can see here, they go down into a squatting position. That's called a songkyo. So that's kind of like a starting position where both opponents are vulnerable, so they can't really do anything in that position. So Nick on the left here, he's assuming an defensive position, shoulder. And Hoi, she evades the cut and counters with her own strike from a defensive position. This is the first pattern in kata. I'll now demonstrate the number 4 pattern, sorry. Nick assumes an offensive position to the side, and Hoi assumes a defensive position back fit. They both clash, but both miss. And Nick thrusts, and Hoi counters with the cut to the helmet, on head. And finally for kata, we're going to demonstrate number 7. See Hoi there demonstrated a technique for cutting through the torso of the opponent as a counter to their cut to their head. After the end of kata practice, they go back down to their songkyo position and then straight back to their same distance that they were before. As you can see, there's a lot of formalities involved in kendo, and as part of the tradition of the samurais training not just their martial skills, but to train themselves to be a better person in society, to learn the basics of respect and honour in Japanese culture. Okay. Now, I'd like to demonstrate to you some of the basics of kendo. So, what we showed you before was kata, and because kata was still a bit dangerous, because they still used a solid wooden sword and no armour, they developed a new type of armour for their practice, and this is called bogu. And they also developed a new type of sword, a wooden sword. This is made out of bamboo slats, and it's called a shinai. And it's obviously, as you can probably tell, a lot less dangerous than a solid wooden sword. So what they're going to do for you now is to demonstrate some of the basic cutting techniques. The first one will be the men strike, which will be a cut to the helmet. Now you notice that there's a lot of vocalization in kendo. This is called ki-ai. This is how the energy is released when you perform a cut. They'll now demonstrate the kote cut, which is the cut to the gauntlet. Now you also notice they have a stomping technique. This is called fumikomi. The idea of a fumikomi is to also help release that power and energy along with the ki-ai. The ki-ai and the fumikomi, the stomping, they all have to be together at the same time with the cut. This is what the judges are looking for when you have a competition. Okay, now they'll demonstrate a do cut, which is a cut to the breastplate. Now you notice each time before they cut, they step in, and when they step in, they do another ki-ai. That stepping in is stepping into a distance from where they can make one step, one movement. Okay, and lastly, they would like to demonstrate Nidan waza, which is a two-attack technique. So they'll be cutting kote and menki. This is a technique that is quite effective in competition when we have a fight. Okay, Yeah, so in regular training, we usually perform these routines so that we warm up our bodies and we can hone in our accuracy of our cuts before we jump straight into free fighting or sparring. Okay, so next we'd like to demonstrate another warm-up routine that is very traditional to Japanese culture. This is called kirikeshi, and it's basically a sequence of continuous cuts to the helmet, and followed by blocks by the opponent to those cuts. And again, it's a way of warming up your body and to hone in the accuracy of your cuts before regular training. So, this is kirikeshi. And it's also to warm up their voices as well. Now when they attack, they're actually calling out the part of the armour that they're cutting. So when they're cutting the helmets, they shout out men, that's the helmet. And when they're cutting the gauntlet, they shout out kote. So they're not just shouting at random things when they do it. Okay, now I'd like to demonstrate shiai, which is basically free fighting. This is just in a training kind of situation. This isn't in a tournament setup. But it is what we do regularly. After our normal training, when we practice our cuts, we usually practice shiai, which is free fighting technique, which you can have not for you. I like to demonstrate some of the free fighting that we do when I'm training. So again, they kneel down, squat down into Sonkyo before they start, so they're both in a local position. And nobody has the upper edge. Okay, punch your Now the shouting and energy involved is highly important in Kendo. Because what the judges are looking for is something called zanshin, which is called fighting spirit. To demonstrate fighting spirit, you not only have to have the energy and the commitment to make a fight, you also have to demonstrate that you defeated your opponent with a single technique. So in Kendo, you can't just hit the armour and score a point for it. You have to have all these other factors involved. The cutting and the stomping has to be at the same time. And there has to be a high energy and dedication from the person for each cut. We see there's a move called Kaishido, which is a block from a cut to the helmet and a cut onto the breastplate. Next we're going to demonstrate to you the competition shiai. So the two fellas holding flags here are called shimpan, they're the judges. And the flags, they indicate who scored a point with each cut. And as you can see, the other two kendo they have ribbons tied onto their backs to indicate which player they are. So raise, well, there's usually 3 judges, and it's a contest between best of 2 out of 3. So if 2 of the 3 judges give the point, then the point is rewarded. Boundary that you're not allowed to step out of. It's usually a little bit bigger than what the space we have here. And if you step out of that boundary, you usually have a warning against you. And 2 warnings means a loss of 1 point. As you can see, Hoi there, that's got the final med cut there. Last of all, okay, and for the last demonstration, we're going to demonstrate to you some of the different styles of sword fighting. So, when you fight in Kendo, you assume an on-guard position, so, and it's called Kamae. So, beforehand, what they were demonstrating to you was called Chudan Kamae, which is the sword at the front of the body, pointed at the throat with both hands of the sword. I'm going to demonstrate to you now 2 different styles of sword fighting, which assume different on-guard positions. One of them is called Jodan, and that is the a highly offensive position, up high above the helmet. And from that position there, it gives them not only greater reach with the sword, but greater speed, because they're that a little bit closer to the target than if you have to raise it up and down at once in one motion. And one of the other techniques we'll show you after this is called Nito, and that's the 2 sword techniques. So the Kendoka will have a long sword in their left hand, which they'll hold up above their head, and they'll have a short sword in their right hand, which they'll use to keep the other person's sword at bay or to manipulate their sword. We'll just wait for them to finish putting on their goggle. Okay, I think they're just about ready. Okay, so first of all, demonstrating Jodan Kamae, which is the offensive single sword technique, held up high above the head. And Keegan will assume the Chudan Kamae position, which is 2-handed, pointed at the front. As you can see, there's a slightly different dynamic involved in this style of fighting. And of course, there's different strategies as well. For Keegan, because it's a very threatening position to him, that up high, his obvious target is to go for the throat. last technique we'll demonstrate to you today is the Nito, the two-sword technique. Now, some of you who are more familiar with Japanese history might know Miyamoto Musashi. He was probably the most famous samurai to use this technique. And it's known as a very, very effective sword fighting technique. It's very hard to beat in a fight. As you can see, he has one sword up high, like in Korea. He has that little short sword that still keeps him at bay. And again, a very different dynamic to the other styles of fighting. The most common strategies for Nito fighters is to use the short sword to try and knock the other person's sword out of the way, or just to move it some way. And that way it opens it up for the long sword to come down with the proper attack. That covers some of the basics of what we learned in Kendo, and I'd like to call anyone who'd like to come up to try their hand at Kendo to hold a shinai and have a go at hitting us, okay? So please, feel welcome to come, take a shinai off one of us and have a bit of a bash. Would you like to come up?
Oh, let's go.
Cool, I'll go get some shinai.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. So when you hold it,
I love that game. Be my lightsaber.